Hello, and thank you for tuning into the Keto Answers podcast. I am your host, Dr. Anthony Gustin, and joining me yet again today is Chris Irvin. So, big news, big exciting news. We just launched our book today. You can pick it up at Amazon primarily in Kindle or paperback format. The book is called Keto Answers, and it is everything that Chris and I have gotten over the last few years. Questions, 268 of them about the ketogenic diet, everything you need to know, all packed into this book. And so this episode is a little bit different. So we started off by talking about the whole book writing process, why we wrote the book, how we wrote it, the structure of it, things you can expect, everything. So after that, we dive into an example of one of the chapters. So chapter 2 regarding carbohydrate, nutrition myths, things like that. And so tune in and hope you enjoy. But before that, I just really appreciate if you pick up the book, leave us a review. It's really, really helpful if we get those reviews on Amazon so that we show up higher in search rankings, more people can find the book and help themselves become healthier. That's our whole goal here. So without further ado, here is our episode talking all about Keto Answers, the book you can buy today. But before we get into the show, I just want to take a quick note to let you know that this show is sponsored by the book Chris Irvin and I just launched called Keto Answers. So this book is obviously the same as the podcast name, but it's very, very fitting because we just basically took every single question that we got asked over the last several years, all the questions I got asked in my clinic, all the stuff that I get sent to me day to day on Instagram, on YouTube, whatever, and compiled all of our answers, research-backed, everything that we've learned working with ourselves, working with others, in a really easy to understand way. So you can read this book from front to back and understand it just like a regular book, or you can flip to the back in the index, and we've broken down each and every question. There's 268 of them. Things like, can I do keto while breastfeeding? What happens on a weight loss plateau? What should I do? What types of animal products should I consume? Are animal products safe? Everything you need to know about a ketogenic diet to help you reach whatever goal you're looking for is contained in this book. And if you are a keto expert, if you're a keto beginner, if you do not know what the hell a ketogenic diet is, but you're just curious to learn a little bit more, I guarantee that there's something in this book for everyone. And just as a side note, Chris and I do not take any profit from this book. Everything goes back into funneling into content, into research, into product development. So we are not profiting from this thing at all. We just want to get the information out there in one condensed spot so you can finally get it. So Keto Answers is on Amazon. You can buy it today. And if you do, please give us some feedback. So writing reviews is the most helpful thing you could do. That really helps our ranking shoot up in Amazon and make sure that people who otherwise wouldn't see the book, see it, get it, read it, and we help as many people as seemingly possible. And if you've already picked up the book, thank you so much for your support. Again, a review would mean a whole hell of a lot. We're just trying to help as many people as we possibly can. So without further ado, let's get into the show. You guys, we have a huge treat for you today. And the treat is a bunch of material from our book that came out today, Keto Answers, which you can pick up on Amazon. Right, Chris?
Yeah. So Keto Answers is live today. We're super excited about it. It's something we've been working on. It's almost a year now since we started working on it.
Well, I started putting it together two and a half years ago.
That's right.
I'd say. I started compiling all this stuff then. So maybe before we get cranking, maybe a little background on the process of doing this. So
yeah.
I started this a couple of years ago. 2.5 years ago. Yeah, I wrote a lot of the content initially. It was just kind of cobbled together through conversations I had with patients, questions I was getting online, information that I knew was sort of controversial or just a lot of questions about. Then I'm like, okay, there needs to be just like somebody put out definitive opinions on this, because even though there's a lot of basic ketogenic books where people are talking about, here's what ketosis is, here's a grocery list, here's 1,000 recipes in the back of the book. Like, yeah, they're out there. They're great. They're necessary. But after 15 of these, it's like the same information was being put out, but I was still getting all the same questions. There's a lot of nuance to the ketogenic diet. It's sort of confusing. People take really definitive opinions on it, whether they're doctors or scientists or just plain, recipe bloggers or whatever. And, no one's right, no one's wrong in a lot of these cases. I just think like some of the stuff, like we obviously agree on a lot. And that's because we sort of look at the science first, look at testimonials and anecdotes and how people are responding to things second, and then sort of formulate an opinion after that and sort of a conclusive answer to a lot of the questions that we get. You ran the information for a long time for another keto website. I brought you on board. After you came on board, I had this kind of choppy draft of a book. I'm like, hey, dude, I don't know what the hell to do with this. It's like, it's all over the place. It's answering all that stuff. So basically reformulated it to like, what was sort of a standard book in the first place that sort of read front to back, needed to be edited. And this was like kind of I would say shitty rough draft, but it had a lot of bones there.
Yeah.
You and I went through and talked about, okay, what is out there right now, like for keto books? Like what information do people have? Like what problem are we trying to solve?
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest thing was that I opened up my Instagram right now. I get like 10 messages a day, people asking me all these questions that I think, either I'm answering repeatedly. We've covered in podcasts before. We've written articles about it. We have done videos about it, et cetera. But there wasn't like one definitive place where a lot of this stuff was put with the references, with the research, with everything behind it. And so Chris took it and we started working with it together, and he fleshed out a lot of things on there, especially like, I've read a lot of research. I understand it, but I'm not really great at like on the spot, like you are, of like being like, oh, the study about this or whatever. It's like you pull in a lot of the research and back a lot of the stuff up. Mm-hmm. I wasn't wrong on too many things, which was great. Happy to hear, but then sort of formatted it in a way that's really non-conventional for a book. So took it, and like you can still read it front to back. Mm-hmm. And so when you open it up and you go through it, it reads front to back like a lot of other books out there. But it's sort of unique in the way where we split this into, instead of just chapters and headings, so like 15, 20 chapters, instead we've split it into 268 questions. Mm-hmm. And so instead of just saying like, hey, here's ketosis, for example, it's like, what is ketosis? And then we give you an answer. Later in the book, it's like, how many carbs should I eat? Or can I do keto while breastfeeding? What happens if I hit a weight loss plateau? And we answer all these things. So we put all of those questions in the back of an index. So that way you can flip to the index and go, okay, what am I struggling with? What questions do I have? They're breaking down by topic. So each topic is sort of the chapter. But again, still reads through front to back, so you can still do it that way. But you can go to each question if you want to flip to that page and understand your answers, sort of like if you were just asking me or Chris stuff on Instagram, like a lot of people do already.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the big goal too is that we want it to be different with this book, different from what a lot is available out there. I mean, you talk about how, it seems like it's either a recipe book when it comes to keto, or it's an information book that is a little bit too scientific and too hard to understand and a little bit too hard to navigate to find what you're looking for. And we wanted to put this book together in a format where, people can read this book front to back, and you could be somebody who's completely novice and know nothing about the ketogenic diet, read it from front to back and learn everything that you need to know. Or you can be somebody that's just like, hey, I am looking to start the keto diet. I've heard about it, but I have a lot of questions. I'm sick of searching the internet and having to go to multiple different websites to find this information and then even have to wonder if it's credible or not. So here we just put everything in one place so that you can just search for your answers and find them. And I think this format's just going to be really applicable to people. You don't have to be somebody that has to understand how to read research to get through this. We've taken the information from the research. We've taken information from working with, clients that we've worked with in the past and stuff that we've experimented with on ourselves. And we've put all this information in this book to make it easy to understand. So I think this format's going to be something that's going to resonate a lot more with people. So we're really excited to get your guys' feedback on it.
We hope so. We hope it's helpful.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah. And also, just to be clear, one thing that we haven't really put a lot of emphasis to in the marketing materials around this book is that we are not taking $1 from this book. We're reinvesting everything back into content, back into product development, everything else like that. So like, we want this community to thrive moving forward. We want to keep answering questions. We're not doing this as a way to make money. Mm-hmm. We're doing this just because we thought it needed to exist. And yeah, there's no like personal gain that we're getting from this. Like everything is going back into investing into growing this community. Yeah,
and I think that brings up a good point for why we really even talked about making this resource when we first started. It's about a year ago that you brought this project to me and started talking to me about it.
We were on a boat in Thailand.
We were, yeah. I won't forget it. We were sitting on a boat in Thailand, and I was living in Tampa at the time still, and I just started working for Perfect Keto, and Anthony just said, I've been working on this book, really want to get it finished. Do you want to come on and help write? He's like, you can just move out to Austin. We can sit down, we can chat about it, we can get working on finishing it. And then I moved out like a month later to Austin, and we started working on it. And now about a month later, it's coming out.
I think it's like nearly a year to the day.
Yeah.
I think it was like late September.
Yeah, I think it was. You're right.
Which is crazy.
Yeah. I mean, we did it in a pretty short period of time.
It's been a lot of work, though, man.
Yeah, it has. Yeah, the first 4 months of it, The first 4 months of writing this book were a little intense, and towards the end of last year and beginning of this year, because when we first sat down, we started talking about writing it. We were like, we want to make a resource. At first, it was like, we want to make this resource for our customers, people who are buying Perfect Keto products, so they can, better know how to follow the diet in conjunction with these products, because we want people to get the most out of this keto diet, and that comes from not just taking the products, but also following the diet.
Right. We haven't had conversations about like, should we just split this out into blog articles? Should we do YouTube videos about it? Like, how are we going to use this? Like, I think someone gave you the manuscript. It was like, I don't know, like 80,000 words, something like that.
A little more. Yeah.
Well, I think when you ended it.
Oh, yeah.
So then we decided, like, you know what? There are no books like this out there. We need to, like, this is how we're going to chop it up. Mm-hmm. We sat watching the islands of the whatever Gulf of Thailand we were in go by, and we're like, okay, this is how we're gonna do it. So we just did that. Chris took it, added another 30,000 words to it. It was like 110,000 words. It's like, and yeah, it's long. It's 504 pages of text, but it's not that like, so it's 268 questions, 504 pages. So roughly 2 pages per answer if you average it out, which is not a lot. But like, we just wanted to cover everything and have it in one spot. Like, even right now, man, we have the podcast is now, this is like 70 some episodes, YouTube channel, like we've put a bunch of stuff on there. Our Instagram has a lot of great content, our blog, like, but it's still so hard to find just one place where you can reliably just go, okay, I can find my answer.
Right.
And so that's when we're like, okay, we need to make it a book. We're not going to repurpose this as different content. And just sprinted through it. Chris did all the heavy lifting at the end.
Yeah. Well, when we started going through it, the reason why it ended up being so much longer than what we originally anticipated is because we started realizing how many questions people actually have. And, you see, and what we did is we kind of talked to a lot of people who are following the ketogenic diet to see, like, okay, when you have this question and you get this question answered, what is the next question that gets sparked from that? So, if you come to me and you say, well, do I need to have carbohydrates, for instance, in my diet? And I say, no, you don't, for these reasons, which we talk about in the book. What's the next question that you have? Well, the next question is probably, well, what about fruit? I heard that fruit's good. Well, what about, this? Or if I'm exercising, do I need carbs?
I don't need them, but can I have them sometimes?
Right. Yeah. And there's just so many questions that stem from one single question. So that's really what happened is like we sit down and we break down, okay, here are the basic questions that everybody asks on keto, but then from those questions, what do they ask? And then from those questions, what do they ask? And then that just ended up being, 268 questions and a lot more than we thought. But still, we think that it's just something that there's nothing in this book. I mean, I know when I first came to you with the completed manuscript and we were done, we're like, we got to chop this thing down. I'm like, okay. And I'm sitting down trying to chop it, and make it a lot shorter. And it's like, well, everything that's in here is really important. These are questions that people are asking on a day-to-day basis. So we kind of had to roll with it.
Yeah. I mean, there was a giant part that you took out that maybe we'll make another book out of it.
That's true. Point. We did have to take that part out.
Basically everything, and I think that's great that we can wait because there's so much research going into this right now, but how to use ketogenic diet for therapeutic reasons. And there's just so much on that. So like, sorry if you're looking for that. Like that's one part that like, and it's like really tough to even give recommendations on that based upon what's out there right now. Yeah.
But what we do help with that is at the end of the book, we do give a guide for all of the places that you can go if you're looking for that. So there's in the appendix at the end, you can actually see what top researchers and educators we recommend for different conditions. So like if you're somebody who has keto or you have cancer and you're thinking about trying the ketogenic diet, this book can be a great resource to help you learn how to follow the ketogenic diet. But if you want to go find the research for the keto diet for cancer, we'll point you in the right direction for that in the back of the book. So those resources are still available in this book.
So we're proud of it. It took a really long time. It's 2.5 years in the making. Mm-hmm. Finally out today. I hope you guys enjoy it. So if you want to go to Amazon, we have it in paperback and in Kindle. And then if we can swing it, perhaps Audible by the beginning of next year.
Yep.
Chris and I don't like reading from scripts. So doing 504 pages reading verbatim, because apparently you cannot just wing it. What I like to do is just read the questions and wing it, kind of like we do on the podcast.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not making shit up, but I don't want to read word for word.
Right.
So if we can figure out some way, we'll get it done. But yeah, if you guys like it, let us know. Please write a review. That would be really, really, really helpful for so many people could find it. And if you don't like it,
be nice.
Yeah, maybe just send us a personal message instead of leaving a scathing review how stupid we are. But either way, I really appreciate your support. And again, like we don't take any money from this stuff, so it's not going to our personal pockets. So
Yeah. And if there's, if anybody comes across any questions that they have that they don't find in the book, let us know that too, because that's something that we want to know too. Our another goal that we have with this is trying to better understand this community. So if there's questions that we didn't address that people have, we want to know those too. So let us know.
Try to stump us.
Yeah.
We'll make a volume 2. It'll come up in another 2.5 years.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you want to get into some of the questions?
Yeah. So this episode, we are actually going to dive into one of the chapters in the book, which is chapter 2. And it is about debunking nutrition myths. So we have a whole chapter dedicated to this because I had a little bit hard time bringing this up. We have a whole chapter dedicated to this because, because we think it's really important for people to have an understanding of why the ketogenic diet is not as popular as it should be. Even though for a lot of you guys it is popular, but why is it that we thought fat was bad for so long? Why is it that we think we need carbohydrates? What is it about like the history of research that has gotten in the way and caused us to eat the wrong way and kind of mess with our health? So that's the purpose of this chapter. So this little excerpt that we're going to chat about here is from the second chapter, which is debunking nutrition myths. And the first question of that chapter is, does the body need carbohydrates?
Yeah, it does, but not from your nutrition.
Exactly.
Is that what we wrote?
That is exactly what's in the book. Yeah. So the point of this is that there are, what we talk about in the book here is that there are certain cells in your body that do need glucose that come from glucose that can come from carbohydrates. It needs them for energy. So there's certain portions of our brain, and then there's our red blood cells, things like that have to have some glucose. But what's nice about our body is that we do not have to consume these carbohydrates to get this glucose. We have internal processes that allow us to acquire it.
And there are other things like mucus production, things like that. So I mean, your body certainly needs glucose, the breakdown of carbohydrates, for a lot of different processes, but you do not need to get it from food. So your body can just make this stuff from other food.
Yeah, and that's a pretty easy thing to understand too. When you look at any of you guys who have followed keto or a very low carb diet, or maybe you've done carnivore where you've been completely zero carb. Or fasted, yeah, your blood sugar does not go to zero. And that's, despite the fact that you're not eating carbohydrates. And that's because your body is able to produce what it needs internally through what we call gluconeogenesis, which we talk about a lot in the book to explain what that is, because there's some misconceptions there too. But this process is in place so that you...
How do you pronounce that?
I say gluconeogenesis. What do you say?
I think glucose.
Gluconeogenesis?
Not gluconio.
You know what?
Gluco.
This actually...
Gluco stop, neo stop, genesis.
We can actually talk about why this is a problem, is because both of us went to school and neither of us probably heard this when we were taught it. We probably had to read it in a book. Right. That's the only reason why we know it. So nobody taught us how to say it properly.
I would bet that I'm saying it properly.
Well, you always think you're right, though.
Gluconio.
Okay, well, whatever you think is right, you guys can read it how you'd like in the book. Gluconio or gluconio, whatever it is. So that's that one, guys, is that we have this process, however you want to refer to it, that exists so that we do not have to eat carbohydrates and still get the glucose that we need. So the short answer to that is no, we do not need carbohydrates. Right. We do not need to eat carbohydrates.
Yeah, and so people know, that some people think that term means you break down muscle mass to make that. It's like, yes, your body can make carbohydrates, aka glucose, via gluconeogenesis from protein, but it also does it primarily a lot from fat as well when you're on a high fat diet. And so fat's broken down. Fat's actually on a glycerol backbone, and I think it's 2 of those equal 1 glucose molecule back in the liver. So you make glucose from fat as well. Your body needs it. It's not something you should be terribly afraid of. It's not going to kill you.
Yeah. So the next question that is in the book that kind of stems from this, and this is kind of an example of what people will ask after they have one question answered, is, okay, you say that we don't have to consume carbohydrates. The body doesn't need to have that. But does that mean that carbs are bad? And that's the next question is, are carbs bad?
No,
they're not, surprisingly. People probably expect us to say yes to that, I think.
Yeah, I think the way people eat carbs in the modern world is bad. So, I mean, if you sort of reverse things a couple 100,000 years and you're out there eating some carbohydrates, you had to work for them, you're eating maybe 50, 75 grams a day max. Yeah. Unless you came across a berry bush that was fully loaded, and it was like one period of time in the year. People are eating like 400 or 500 grams of carbs a day, and like with processed food without micronutrients, so like really screws their hunger signals, and fruit like loaded up with fructose and like different forms. Like it's not the type of carbohydrate that people should just eat as real food carbohydrate.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you get the carnivore people out there, saying like, "Oh, everything besides animal products are bad for you," or like not additive to you. Like, whatever you want to argue, whatever you want to argue as a carnivore person. But regardless, people have been eating plants for a very long period of time. They've been eating carbohydrates. Like carbohydrates in general are not going to kill you. Your body has a process to deal with them, to use them for energy. Is it ideal to eat 400 grams of carbohydrates via super processed food? No, that's probably going to kill you eventually.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the big thing to point out is that when trying to determine if carbs are bad for you, it depends on what your diet has been and how long it's been like that for. I mean, if you, like you're saying, if you're somebody who's always been following a lower carbohydrate diet, you've never been high on processed carbohydrates, you're not somebody who has developed a severe degree of insulin resistance, then carbs are going to be just fine for you. They can be a great fuel source that you can utilize, and you can probably quickly transition back to burning fat. But for people who have chronically overconsumed carbohydrates for a long period of time, they develop insulin resistance. And one of the things we know is that people who are insulin resistant, they no longer utilize carbohydrates well. And not only do they not utilize them well, but it's actually harmful for their bodies to be metabolizing a lot of them. So in these cases, then yes, carbohydrates could be bad for somebody. And there's a lot of studies that we can look at for that. I know there's some studies on like weight loss diets, for instance, where they compare low carbohydrate diets to high carbohydrate diets, calorie matched for weight loss. And in people who are insulin sensitive, people who metabolize carbohydrates really well, there might not be a big difference in weight loss. But for the people who are insulin resistant, who don't use carbohydrates very well, there's a huge difference in weight loss for people who are following low carb versus high carb. And that's because these carbs are no longer beneficial for them.
Yeah. And sometimes that can reverse. Sometimes you can tolerate carbs later on if you do this for a couple of years.
Yeah. And I mean, and you can talk about that too. I know that both you and I have followed keto for a long time. And I think that when both of us started, we may have had damaged metabolisms that probably weren't conducive of eating a lot of carbohydrates. But now we've kind of repaired our metabolisms to where we can utilize carbohydrates if we feel like we want to, or if we feel like we need to, and it doesn't have the same effect on us that it used to.
Yeah. So remember you were over a couple of weeks ago, and we had this little board out, and there's like prosciutto and cheese, and there were figs on it.
Yeah.
I posted it on my Instagram, and I actually just got a comment today that like pulled it up because I haven't looked at that post in a while, and people were freaking out.
Of course they were.
What? You ate a fig? Can you
the keto
figs?
Doctor? No way.
Is it going to kill you? Can I eat a fig? I'm like, man, like if you're worrying about eating a fig or two, like it's not going to kill you. Like fig's not going to kill you. I'm going to tell you that right now.
Yeah, and that actually brings up a good point too. I saw a meme today on Instagram that showed this, and it was like the old Batman meme where like Batman's slapping Robin, and it says like Robin's saying like, "Can you eat that? Is it keto?" And he's like, and Batman slapping him saying like, "Ketosis is a metabolic state, not a food list." And the point is like. For some people, no. Like there are some people that when you start a ketogenic diet, you're starting it because you are like very obese, you're really insulin resistant. Yeah, like any amount of carbohydrates may really kick you out of ketosis and may really prevent you from seeing a lot of the benefits. But as you get adapted to this diet and you improve and repair your metabolism, which we know happens on a ketogenic diet, you improve your insulin sensitivity. You can utilize those. You can, break down carbohydrates very well. You can use them as a great energy source until you go back the other way and start chronically overconsuming them again. But again, we're also talking about the right carbohydrates. So there's a big difference between having, crackers with peanut butter on them that are highly processed and having a fig.
Right. Like for instance, tonight. I'm sure there'll be a lot of gasps in the 5 people listening to this podcast, but so we're doing a little burger night, and I'm going to make sweet potato fries on the side.
No.
Eat those. And
you must be a phony.
And I'm not going to die.
You must be a phony.
I mean, I think people that generally vilify carbohydrates when they think like, okay, keto, good, fat, good, carbs, bad.
Yeah.
It's way more complex than that. Like eating some carbohydrates, like people have done it for a long period of time. It's not going to kill you. Like you said, sometimes they may not fit to your goal. And if your goal is different or you want to get to your goal faster, it may be advantageous for you to have fewer carbs and more carbs.
Yep.
That's just the way it is.
Yeah. So I think, again, that's a long
goal tonight is enjoying sweet potato fries.
Yeah. And that's a long-winded way to say that like processed carbohydrates are bad. Yes. I think we can agree to that.
Yeah, I mean, not eating things that aren't food
not great
is bad.
Yeah.
Food is stuff that's oils and like made of real ingredients. Like that's what food is. So you eat super processed stuff. Of course, it's not good for you.
Right. And then outside of processed carbohydrates, when you just talk about other carb sources like, fruit and tubers and different things like that, the answer is that it depends. They're not inherently bad. For some people, they may not be beneficial for you to be consuming at this point in your life. And that's why very low carbohydrate ketogenic diets can be really beneficial. But that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with being able to consume them later on down the road or that you can never consume a carb again. I think one of the natural things that we see from a natural cycle that somebody has on keto is you start keto. And like I said, if you're somebody who's starting it because you were obese and you've had, bad relationships with food in the past, and now you start keto, you cut out sugar and it's working really well for you, you end up falling into this camp of like, carbs are bad, I can never have them again, and I need to avoid them at all costs. And you can almost, get a bad relationship with food and having that thought process. And then people, as they continue to follow keto for me, that I'm coming up on like 5 years, I think, of following the diet. My first year I was like that, and then I came around to like year 2 and 3, and I was just like, oh no, actually, if I'm smart about it, I can use carbs just fine, and there's no reason to be fearful of them. So I think that's kind of an important thing to take into consideration, is that they're not inherently bad, but some people may not benefit from using them.
Next.
All right. So the next question that we get then is, are clean carbs okay? So we kind of just talked about that. So we actually can bypass that question because we just talked about when you talk about clean carbs, which are some of these like fruit and tubers and different sources like that.
Totally. So yeah, it just depends on your goal.
Exactly. Yeah. And your metabolic state as well.
Yeah. So it depends on you.
Yeah. So we just covered that one. And, from there, one of the common questions that we also add to the book that people get is, okay, so you're talking about how like the body doesn't need carbs. But carbs aren't inherently bad, but maybe, for some people we shouldn't eat them. But where does fruit fall into this? So the question is like, is fruit healthy? A lot of people are told their whole lives, apple a day keeps the doctor away. You need to have a lot of fruit to be healthy. You got to have the fiber and stuff. Is that true? Is fruit healthy?
There's nothing in fruit that you need that you can't get elsewhere. So
exactly.
You don't need fruit. And then fruit as well on its own is there's a very different spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
The way I think about this is like, what existed 1,000, 2,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago versus now? It's like even berries are the ones that are least different than before. Like strawberries used to be way smaller, way more bitter. Now they're like big and juicy. Blueberries used to be like a little bit smaller, harder to eat, only ripe at a certain time. Like that hasn't changed that much. But like, and if you look at like apples, like all apples used to be like size of raspberries and like crab apples and like ultra bitter. Now they're giant and juicy and like candy because we've taken them and we've modified them so that they're sweet and they last a long time or whatever. So like I kind of look at fruit on a spectrum of like things that are sweet to not sweet.
Yeah.
And so I've told the story a bunch in this podcast, but when I had a blood glucose meter in last year, continuous blood glucose meter, I had an apple that broke the meter. It's crazy. Like went from 80 something to like 200 in a short period of time. I also tested. I put it on my Instagram. I don't know, it was a month or two ago. Like when summer started to hit here, I'm like, man, I just want a watermelon. So I crushed an entire like a smaller watermelon, destroyed my blood glucose. And it's like, but watermelon sometimes is on these keto lists. It's kind of confusing. It's like, how much do you eat? Are you eating a whole watermelon?
Right.
Or you're not? Is it your metabolism, whatever? But I mean, even still, I think that like, and I know you're big on like fructose versus non-fructose sources. Like sometimes fructose can also blunt this experience of your blood glucose raising. So like if you have fruit, a lot of it can be fructose, half of it, and you can maybe have a little bit of glucose, but you have a lot of fructose. Fructose isn't that great for a lot of different reasons. But yeah, like it just depends again on the type of fruit, the amount of sugar, how much you're eating, your goal specifically, your metabolic history. There's a lot of things that go into this.
Yeah, I think the couple big things that you touched on there at the end is like, just like we talked about with carbs in general, for your metabolic state, if you're in a situation, in a position where you don't utilize carbs well, fruit's not going to be an exception to that, because fruit is still a carb. It still contains a lot of sugar. It just contains a slightly different sugar. So there's, that's one thing to take into consideration. But the other thing is how much of it that you're having. And I think that's the big thing to point out, is that a lot of people have used fruit as like a get out of jail free card when they want like to have something sweet. So I hear people all the time who are trying to eat a quote unquote healthy diet, and they're replacing their sweets with fruit. They're having multiple apples and bananas and stuff a day. It's like all you're doing is you're frequently stimulating a blood glucose response. And like we've seen from your results with the apple, you're a pretty big blood glucose response that over time is going to lead to damaged metabolism, especially because fructose can be a very pro-inflammatory sugar if we're consuming it in excess. And that's something that we've actually seen in research. So again, it's not as cut and dry to say, is fruit healthy? Well, certain fruits in moderation, like berries and lower glycemic fruits, don't contain as much sugar. It can be great. But a lot of other fruits, and especially the way that we've modified them today, consumed in excess, can definitely be harmful. And for most people trying to follow a ketogenic diet and maintain a state of ketosis, probably need to be avoided because of that big spike in blood sugar. So it's not always as cut and dry as saying yes or no to it. But I think when it comes to fruit, we just have to realize that, you said it at the very beginning of this, is that we can get anything that we want from fruit, from other sources, without the need for all the sugar and fructose that comes with fruit.
Totally. Someone sent me a message the other day saying, I'm trying to do a ketogenic diet, but I haven't had fruit. And my doctor told me I need to eat fruit to get those juicy vitamins. Like, what?
The juicy vitamins. Do you get those from fruit snacks too?
There are, juicy fruit.
Yeah.
Let me just set the record straight. There are no quote unquote, juicy vitamins found in fruit that you can't get elsewhere.
Yep.
That's just a fact.
I have to bring this up too, because I thought that this was pretty funny. I had a friend that I went to grad school with. He's a food scientist. He has an Instagram page, and he tagged me, and he was commenting about, I don't remember what the exact post was about. I know he had a son recently, and he's feeding his kid like a mostly meat diet, and people are freaking out about it a little bit. And somebody commented saying that if you look at the research, humans are frugivores. We should only be eating fruit and nothing else, is what this person said.
That's what the research says, huh?
That's what the research said. So one, I don't even know that frugivore is a real thing. I think that might be maybe that is. I don't know. I've never heard of that before.
Why the G? Why wouldn't it be fruit?
I don't know. Frugivore is what they said, and they referenced it multiple times. And the comment that I kind of said jokingly back to is that, like, just reading that statement made my CRP just jump up, just reading it.
Yeah, they didn't work out so well for Steve Jobs, did it?
Yeah, exactly.
It's just like, if no one's ever thought about that one, it's like, this guy's a fruitarian. Steve Jobs, ironic, founder of Apple.
Yeah, that is ironic.
Ate only fruit, then eventually died of pancreatic cancer.
Yep.
Is there a link between eating a lot of sugar and your pancreas working a lot?
Sure is.
Yeah. So love Steve, all the stuff he produced. But man, like, just look at that as obviously it's like more people have pancreatic cancer and like it's terrible, but like it's very straightforward.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, how do you not connect those dots?
Yeah. And there's that, I mentioned, we reference a study in the book too, but there is one study that actually looked at even comparing different sources of sugar. So looking at like fructose versus like glucose, and I think sucrose was the other one that they looked at. And I made the mention of CRP, that's C-reactive protein, which is like the most common inflammatory marker that we use to measure in our body. And in that study, they found that CRP went up much higher in the people that were consuming fructose compared to even glucose and sucrose. So that's kind of the point, is that like
okay, so let's just have the people not freak out. Fruit's not going to kill you or give you pancreatic cancer, but like if you only eat fruit and eat fruit in abundance, and like that's your only diet, and you have massive amount of fructose, not a great idea in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, and that's the point here, is that when you're talking about lower glycemic fruits like berries and fruits that are still in the way that they're supposed, like they're more natural in the way that they were 200 years ago, like you're saying, those fruits contain a lot less fructose. Those fruits are ones that can be a lot healthier for us to consume. What we're talking about here are more of the genetically modified fruits that you're getting at grocery stores.
Actually, I looked at blueberries recently, and blueberries have like a 50-50 split. It's like pretty representative. However, the amount per berry is just so much lower than, for instance, like an apple or something like that. So it's like you just eat way less. Like
Exactly.
It would take 8 cups of blueberries to be the same amount as some other fruit, for example.
Exactly. Yeah. So again, take home point here, guys, is that there's nothing wrong with fruit. There's even, we talk about in the book how there's even certain fruits that people can incorporate on a ketogenic diet and have that be just fine. But we should not be overly consuming the genetically modified fruits that we have available today that are just hunkered down with a lot of sugar, especially fructose. Not going to be a good thing regardless of any diet that you're on. And to be honest, go ahead.
I was going to say, man, like it's one of these things where I'm starting to get way more into like eating locally, eating seasonal.
Yep.
And it's like, look when fruit is available. It's like such a small window.
Yeah.
And like for all plants, really, like besides some that are like leafy greens, available pretty much all year round, depending on the climate. Right?
Yep.
Tubers and stuff like that, like available a lot throughout the year. Fruit and certain things like that, it's like the window is so short.
Yeah.
Like stuff gets ripe and then it's done immediately. There's a tiny window where you should probably be eating fruit anyways.
Yep.
And so just thinking about that, like when fruit would have been available, and then look at timing wise, like it was probably also advantageous that it was before like end of the summer, like sort of right now, before winter, where maybe it would have been helpful for people to like sit by a berry bush and gorge on them and get a little fat heading into the winter. So they had energy to sustain themselves. Eating all that stuff every day of the year, all the time, it doesn't really work that way. It's actually sort of interesting about that. So I kind of like eat carbohydrates intuitively more so now. Like I'm working out, feel a little sluggish, and just like craving carbs. I'll pop them in. Like usually, I've noticed the last couple of years, especially that it's like mid to late summer is when I feel like I just want to crush sweet potatoes and plantains, stuff like that.
Oh, I thought you were going to say you were trying to get those juicy vitamins in at the end of the summer.
Well, I get those no matter what. But yeah, it's just one of those things where like I don't know if that's programmed in me. I don't know if it's just because it's so goddamn hot here in Austin that like I don't want to eat hot stuff, and like something like a juicy vitamin sounds nice. I don't know what it is, but it's a random tangent in case anyone's interested.
Yeah, no, I think that brings up a good point, and we can kind of wrap this up with saying that like I think that's one of the reasons why paleo in some ways has fallen short is because if you think about the purpose of paleo and how we're trying to eat like our ancestors and stuff, but most people who are following paleo are eating massive amounts of fruit year round. That doesn't really align with what the whole goal of like paleo dieting is, in my opinion. And I think that's
they're also eating like treats with like 40 grams of honey. Well, honey's paleo, so eating it.
Right. Yeah, so that's just one of the examples of why I think like paleo tends to fall short, because a lot of people aren't following it the right way, and I think that's one of the reasons why keto tends to work a little bit better is because people do assume that you can't have, people start to realize that they're not supposed to have, or they hear that they're not supposed to have fruit on a ketogenic diet. So they end up cutting all of these things out. Well, when you're cutting out all of this stuff that you used to be eating in excess that was causing you problems before, you're going to see improvements in your health. So that tends to be one of the reasons why keto will give you a little bit better results when it comes to things like weight loss compared to paleo, because you're cutting out these things that are approved that you're eating in excess on the paleo diet that we say are, most people say aren't approved on keto. We don't say that they're not approved. We just say that they need to be kept in moderation.
Truth.
Yeah.
Let's do another one. We got time for another question. Let's do one more.
Okay. So let's see here. So the next question in the book that comes from after that is, where can I get vitamins and minerals aside from fruit? So we mentioned that a little bit earlier, talking about how we can get everything that we need from everything that we think we're getting from fruit, we can get from other sources, but how can people get that stuff in their diet?
I'm the biggest fan of animal products, to be honest. So egg yolk, liver, organ meats, shellfish, oysters, red meat, are sort of like where I point a lot of people to for nutrients first and foremost. That still, and even more now, seems to be controversial due to all these goddamn fake meat companies trying to push propaganda,
baby.
That their soy burgers are better for you than not, or more environmentally friendly, or whatever. But yeah, I mean, just like we are animals. Those animals run the same way we do, getting stuff that they can turn carbohydrates in plants into fats in their stomach. And nutrients and condense those nutrients into their tissues, and then we eat them. Like, that's great.
Yep.
So those are some of the top sources of nutrients that I would choose.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And you bring up a really good point there, in that the reason why, plant sources the animal sources are superior is because these animals are able to eat plant sources and sequester the nutrients that are found in them in a way that is more bioavailable for us as humans. So we are actually able to absorb more of the nutrients found in animal products like red meat than we can from fruits and vegetables. And, as an additional thing to that, there's a lot of very important vitamins and minerals that we need that we can't get from fruit and vegetables, like, B vitamins and iron, two big things that a lot of people who are on plant-based diets end up being deficient in. So choline, yep.
It's hard to get.
Yep.
Vitamin A, vitamin K.
Yep. And a lot of these things are, deficiencies in these things are why a lot of people are experiencing whatever choline deficiencies have been linked to neurodegenerative diseases.
Yeah, and also fatty liver. So yep. You're going to have that. You get a lot of fructose. Your body's all screwed up. Can't clear with the choline.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just a lot of this terrible cycle.
Yeah, so you end up, when you talk about all these vitamins and minerals, you can get everything that you're trying to get out of, this is probably maybe a too simplified way to look at it, but you can get everything that you're trying to get out of vegetables or plants in general, whether that's fruit, vegetables. You can get that in meat, and you can get it in a source that is better absorbed for you as a human, so you can actually utilize it to a greater degree in these meat sources.
Yeah, you can eat much less when you eat
animal
products.
Yep.
Yeah. So, we could do a whole episode about this type of stuff. Maybe write another book. Who knows?
Well, it's all in there. So, if you guys want to learn more, but we actually have one of the chapters in the book is dedicated towards the different types of ketogenic diets. So we talk about, regular keto, we talk about, cyclic, targeted, and then we talk about carnivore, and we talk about all of the things that people are talking about now with carnivore, the safety of it, how it can be beneficial, all of that stuff. So we break down a lot of this stuff. It's no secret that we're pretty big on meat. We think it's pretty great for your health. The research points in that direction, and we talk about that a lot in the book. So check it out.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for listening to us rant. We'll hopefully do another couple episodes like this, but yeah. Any last words about the book? Anything that people should know? I think we covered it a lot in the beginning of the podcast, but
yeah, I think, biggest thing is give us your feedback. That's the whole reason why we put this out there, is we want to know, it's not a vanity thing for us to hear how this book is helpful to people. It's really important for us to know if what we're doing is useful and helpful to everybody that's out there. So let us know what this book has done for you, what you've learned from it. Share that stuff on social media. Let us know, what we can do to, improve it in the future too.
You use a hashtag online of just Keto Answers, or just send us a message. I'm Dr. Anthony Gustin on Instagram. Chris is
the ketologist.
The ketologist. You're lucky that Ohio State didn't get that trademark.
I know. I was worried about that.
Change.
I know, because I think ketologist might be taken on Instagram. I might have lost it.
Oh man, you got to double up on that.
All
right,
guys. Thanks a lot for having us.
All right, before we take off, just a quick note that the book Chris Irvin and I just published, Keto Answers, is finally available. So 2.5 years of work, and it's finally out. So you can grab it on Amazon, go over there, pick it up. But yeah, it's everything you need to know about a ketogenic diet. So it covers 268 questions. You can read it front to back, or you can go to the index, pick out whatever questions make sense for you. Like, can I build muscle on a ketogenic diet? What happens if you have a cheat meal? What happens if you fall off the wagon and need to get back on? All this stuff is covered. Hopefully it's as helpful as humanly possible. We put it out there because we just kept getting the same questions all the time and wanted everything in one spot. So we did that, and it's out. You can pick it up on Amazon. And again, if you do, thank you so much for your support. Again, a review would mean so much. It would help us reach people who would otherwise maybe not be in a ketogenic diet. So, we're trying to help as many people as possible, and we think this is going to be a really great tool. So if you guys did, thank you so much for your support.